Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I want to let you know my name is Lelainia Lloyd, and I'm coming to you from the west coast of Canada, just outside of Vancouver, BC. Before we get started, I just want to respectfully acknowledge that I make my homes on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish, Coquitlam, Squamish, Musqueam, Stolo, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And I want to welcome you to the series NMOS, Misdiagnosis NMOSD, the importance of getting it right, which is part of the Understanding the Canadian NMOSD Journey series. This program was sponsored by Alexion Pharmaceuticals, and it will be recorded. So I'm just going to let you all know that. The goal of this series is to elevate awareness of NMOSD in Canada while engaging thoughtful and meaningful conversations with the Canadian NMOSD community. And the recordings will be available on the Sumaira Foundation website, Facebook, and YouTube channels with closed captioning and French language translations forthcoming. And also, I want to introduce to you Sue Ouellette, who is an NMOSD patient who comes from Alberta, just outside of Calgary, and Marc McIntyre, who is also in Alberta. Maybe, Marc, you can let us know where you are geography-wise in Alberta.
Calgary.
Calgary, perfect. So you're almost neighbors.
Yeah, Drumheller's what, an hour and change?
Yep.
So this morning, the way this will work is we will be talking about Sue and Marc's misdiagnosis journey for about a half hour, and then we will go to questions and answers. So if you have a question at any point for anyone, feel free to type it in the chat box, and I will get to as many of them as we can. So I just want to thank Sue and Marc for joining us and being so willing to share their stories with us, because it's so important.
You're welcome.
Talk about the journey of being misdiagnosed and then getting a correct diagnosis. So to start off, Sue, if you could tell us, when were you diagnosed and how long did it take you to be diagnosed?
I was diagnosed about February of last year, but I had it for over a year. They misdiagnosed me with rheumacyphalitis.
Okay, and can you maybe just explain briefly what that is?
Well, really, there's not a lot of information about it. All it said when I Googled it was there's a lot of causes and it could be fatal and it could not be. So my doctor thought, the neurologist at the time thought that it would just go away.
Wow.
It would pass.
Okay.
And then I had a relapse last year in February. I was in the States and I went to the Mayo Clinic, and that's where I got diagnosed.
Wow.
I did some plasma exchanges and they flew me back.
Okay. And Marc, how long ago were you diagnosed and how long did it take you to get diagnosed?
I was diagnosed in 2012, and this started late summer of 2008, and it was sort of a fascinating journey because I couldn't get anybody to believe me. I was in Ottawa at the time.
Okay, and what did they misdiagnose you with?
Basically nothing, because they didn't believe me.
Wow.
The first neurologist I saw, I took myself to emergency. Now we were talking 2009 by this time in the spring, and I went to emergency in Ottawa, and I was in the pest management business at the time. And the neurologist, his first thought was I had been playing with the chemicals, not doing what I should have been doing. And so there's a blood test they can run to look for pesticides in your system. And so when he came back, and I said, "Did you find anything?" Because I knew what the answer would be. He's like, "Nope." And then subsequently, when I finally was able to get a GP, he actually saw the report, and the doctor put in there that it was all in my head.
Wow. So they
And
thought that you had chemical poisoning that you had caused yourself. And then basically when they found nothing, and what were your symptoms at that point that, you know, like what had moved you to go to the ER in the first place?
Basically, the backstory is in the summer of 2008, I was taking a wasp nest down, and I was 10 feet in front of it. It was just hanging off a branch on a tree. But it was a gray, cloudy day. And the customer kind of looked at me a little oddly and said, "You can't see it." And I'm like, "Where is it?" And then once I focused on it, I was like, "Oh, it's right there." Okay. And dealt with it. And I thought, first thing I thought was, this again. Because in the late 80s, I'd run into a very similar issue. And then after about 7 or 8 months, it just cleared up and didn't bother me again.
So you were having visual disturbance. Were you having pain in your eyes at that point? No. Okay.
It was just like a day like where, you know how you get those cloudy days, but it's really bright cloud.
Yeah.
That still bothers my eyes.
Wow.
And then basically, once I got into the winter, I started to have some bowel and bladder problems. And by spring, which was what took me to the hospital, was the fact my hands and my feet were going numb.
And Sue, what symptoms were you having that was moving you into seeking care at that point?
Well, the first time my fingers went numb. And then one day I woke up and I couldn't walk.
Wow.
Then when I had the relapse, what made me go to the Mayo is that I had a splitting headache one night, and I woke up and I couldn't see out of my left eye. And I still can't. They were hoping it might come back, but now seeing many neurological optical guys, they're pretty well positive it's not going to come back.
So, okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you go ahead.
Oh, okay. So how did being re-diagnosed with NMO affect you?
Well, at least I had an answer. Because at that time, like Mark, nobody believes you. You're in pain on your hands. I mean, my husband is a darling. He believes anything I say, which is good. But I really still don't have a lot of feeling. Like my whole body's kind of numb from my toes to my lips, I always say. Like coming out of the dentist.
And how old were you when you were re-diagnosed, just so people know?
Well, it was 60 at my first one. When I was re-diagnosed, I was 61.
Okay. So
I am 62 now.
Yeah. And Mark, for you, how old were you?
I was 44 when I started.
Yeah.
And then when I was diagnosed, I would have been 48.
Okay. So there was quite a bit of time for you.
Yeah, it was. They couldn't put a finger on it, and to be very fair to the doctors, what they knew about NMO then versus what they know now is leaps and bounds, right? To be very fair to them, but they ignored some things, like they actually. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say to you, when you were told that you had NMO, what did they tell you about the disease? How did they explain to you what it was?
I knew more about it than they did. And it was a neuro-ophthalmologist that confirmed it, what we always had suspected. Because when I went to the MS clinic in 2010 in Ottawa, the first neurologist I saw there was that's what he thought it was NMO. And we had already read some things about it. But at that time they were still running the old test, for aquaporin 4. I've never tested positive for it.
Okay. So you're one of those people that falls into the false negative.
Yeah. even though like my neurologist here in Calgary, she said what I have is classic NMO.
Right. Yeah, the reason Mark's saying that for everybody that's listening is that Calgary is one of the main testing centers for aquaporin 4 antibodies. So the majority of the tests in Canada are sent there for processing. So, you know, he's assuming that doctors in his province would know what we're happening. So,
well, at that time, I think 2010, they weren't doing any testing in Canada because the first test they did in Ottawa, they had to actually get permission because it had to go to the Mayo Clinic.
Right, mine did too. I was tested in 2007, so same thing. Wasn't available. I think the test at that point was only 2 years old.
Yeah,
and they were
it's not
sending
nearly
all,
as sensitive now
yeah,
as
they
it
were
is
sending
now.
all of them to Mayo Clinic. So yeah. And Sue, what did they tell you when they diagnosed you about NMO? Like, what kind of information were you given?
Well, they never really gave me a lot of information. Because I'm up from a small town, they sent me to a more regional one in Red Deer. Now, that neurologist misdiagnosed me with a double stroke he thought I had. So it was both sides of my brain, right? And until I got really sick, did they really realize that it wasn't a stroke? But he didn't know. So when I did have the relapse and the Mayo Clinic told me, that's when I got on the internet and started reading about it, going, yes, that's right. That's what's happening. So there's a lot of neurologists out there that don't know.
That's very true.
I have one now in Calgary, which is great. So
so you said that you were looking online for information. Where were you looking?
HealthLink, which other one? Well, that's the only one I remember, right? Yeah, whichever popped up with symptoms and that.
Were you able to find any information like from any of the foundations for NMO or?
Well, no, I didn't really go that far. At that point, all I want to know is it fatal or not.
Right.
I am, yeah. And then, like I said, they flew us back to Calgary. I have a new neurologist team in Calgary, so it's good.
So Marc, when you found out that you had NMO, were you connecting with any patients? Like, did you talk to anybody about your situation?
No, they're, to be blunt, the MS clinic in Ottawa wasn't the most helpful. A lot of that kind of falls down on one person, but no, there was just not a whole lot. The only person, and then I think maybe within a year or so, I connected with somebody through the Guthrie Jackson Foundation and out of Toronto who has it, and we've been connected ever since. So she was a huge help.
And how did that make a difference for you, finding somebody else that had your disease?
Somebody that would understand what I had, because I think that's the biggest battle, is the mental side of it. And that's probably the side that where the neurological community to a degree does fall down, is they're just like, well, we'll check you out and like, okay, we'll see you in 3 months. And that was sort of they did. Whereas like here in Calgary, like Foothills has the only program like it in Canada. It has what's called the Optimus program. And that's designed for MS patients and NMO patients. So you have to get a referral from your neurologist. But basically it's the full gamut: physio, the mental health side of things, and a few other things. And be an awesome thing that it would be available to right across the country. But
so it sounds like you've benefited from the fact that they have some collaborative care and support systems for patients, that it's not just you get your diagnosis and see you later, that there's somewhere that you can connect and get, you know, especially mental health support, because I always feel like that's the piece of the puzzle that's really missing for So it sounds like that's been super helpful for you. And
Yeah.
Sue, how did you connect with people in our community when you were first diagnosed? Were you able to find somebody that had NMO?
Oh, you're talking to me now. Okay.
Yeah. Would you like me to-
No, I haven't. Actually, what I did is I went on Facebook, and there's a couple of groups there, and I reached out. I think, I don't know, some guy named Marc got back
That's
to me.
me.
Maybe it was Marc.
That's me.
It was. Oh, thank you. Yeah, because at least you can say, this has happened to me. Has anybody else had this? And then you get answers, and it's supportive.
That's one really great thing about our community, is the fact that once one of us is diagnosed, if we find somebody else approaching us for help, that we're there for them and, do everything we can, because we've all been in that position where we know nobody that has this disease, and it can be really isolating and confusing, and you don't know how to handle it. And so having somebody to kind of grab your hand and be a lifeline through that process is really, really important. And it sounds both of you, by getting connected, that's really helped support you emotionally and mentally.
Yeah.
So what kind of advice do you have, Marc, for newly diagnosed NMO patients?
Find, get your information, do your research, through Guthrie Jackson, that sort of thing. But it's come to terms with it. And I know that sounds easier said than done, because it took me a while. Because if you don't come to terms with what you have and face it, it eats at you. And you tend to lose a lot, both, you lose relationships, you lose family, you lose a lot. And I was having a rotten day one day a couple years ago, and I just dropped a certain 4-letter word and told it where to go, and I thought, oh, that felt good. So that's what I tell people jokingly, just, nobody's around, drop a certain 4-letter word and tell it where to go. Self-help 101.
And Sue, for you, what kind of advice do you have for newly diagnosed patients?
Oh my, like Marc says, just be positive. You have to be positive. Otherwise it will eat you. I mean, I still are not at the point where this is my life. I'm sure that's going to be coming, because the more that gets taken away from me, the worse I feel. So I got to grab that and just go with it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, every time you lose something that means something to you, whatever it is, whether it's a little bit of your eyesight or it's, something simple like the feeling in your hands and maybe petting your dog and you can't feel that they're soft, all of those things have to be grieved, and it takes time to work through that. And it's an ongoing process because, your health changes, month to month, year to year, and we hope that we don't have relapses, but sometimes when we do, we just have to kind of deal with that kind of stuff. It's an ongoing grieving process. So yeah, I think both of what you've said about reaching out and getting that support in place and just talking to people in our community is really, really important. So I'm just wondering too, in terms of being misdiagnosed, when you didn't know that you had MS, were you on medications that maybe made an impact in your long-term health at all? I'm just wondering, because Sue, you have something that I've never even heard of that they misdiagnosed you with. And I'm wondering if they had started you on medication for that and how that affected you.
Well, I really believe if I would have been diagnosed properly, then I wouldn't have had the relapse that took my eyesight and my mobility away. Because when this first hit me, I was still walking. Oh no,
you were.
No, I used a walker, but I could go to the bathroom by myself. You know, I didn't have those issues with your bowels and, you know, which happens now. You know, the eyesight is nothing. I have a good eye. That if it goes, I don't know. But yeah, so the relapse hit me hard. And that's what's hard for me to understand too. Like if they had done it a year ago before, maybe that I wouldn't have had the relapse and I would just be getting on with their life with an NMO.
Right.
And I do have a life with NMO, but right now to me it's not a good life. Like my goal now is to go to the bathroom by myself. get that piece out of the way, and I think I'm clear sailing after that.
I'm sure that's relatable to a lot of people with NMO. I think, you know, a lot of us struggle with sort of those more personal aspects of the disease. And oftentimes, you know, we don't talk about those parts. And, you know, it's important. People struggle with it all the time. And, you know, you're very brave to be sharing that, I think. And Marc, for you, like, how was that for you in terms of like, were you started on medications that you might have not been on otherwise?
No, at the time in Ontario, all they had available was Celseptin azathioprine, and it took them probably the better part of 3 years to put me on a medication. They couldn't come they couldn't grasp what I had or understand it. Like they did, I can't remember the name of the test, but you know, when you rub your eyes, you get like stars.
Right.
It's an old eye test. A lot of places, they just don't use it anymore. So they sent me for that. And because they knew I was having visual issues, I could go into a room like with fluorescent lighting and I'd have to sit like this. I couldn't handle fluorescent lighting.
Yeah.
And so they sent me for that test. And then subsequently, they found there was a problem, but they didn't refer me to a neuro-ophthalmologist. But no, but because they couldn't figure out what I had, I was a proverbial square peg in the round hole.
Right.
They sent me to a rheumatologist who he said because I had a false positive for lupus show up. And so they basically fought me off on him, and he started me on azathioprine. And I said to him, I said, look, I can avoid it, you know, we'll try it for a year, but it was a low dose anyways. And then subsequently, like, I just didn't see any more point of seeing him. And then 2014, I had a relapse, and then subsequently they got me going on the Mayo's recommended guidelines for azathioprine, and but it took probably 2 to 3, a good solid two relapses before they really did anything other than the steroids.
Wow. Yeah. And time is definitely miling in our case, you know. Yeah, it just points out how important it is to have the correct diagnosis and not be either left with no medications, so you're having relapses, or the wrong medications and you're having relapses.
Yeah, because so like in my case, I know what triggered my relapses. It was a flu shot. Because they did it. There was a study, I think, came out about 1.5 years ago, and they found that like vaccines, flu shots, that sort of thing, can trigger relapses for people not on a medication to suppress your immune system.
Right.
And because mine always occurred in the late fall, early winter, and it was within weeks of having a flu shot.
So I want to ask both of you, if I may. So when you're having really bad days with NMO, what helps keep you positive? What keeps you going?
I daydream a lot.
Sorry, what?
I daydream a lot.
Daydream. What do you daydream about? Things you want to do, or?
Yes, like we actually, we're snowbirds. We own a place down in Phoenix. I want to so bad to go back there. So I just keep trying to keep positive, and it will happen, right?
When COVID blows over.
Well, yes, now we got that to deal with, but that's
Yeah.
okay because now
Yeah.
nobody sees my puffy face.
Yeah. And Mark, what keeps you going?
I think just knowing, you know, I'm got the right care. I haven't had a relapse in a few years now. So I just, you know, I just kind of go day to day and just, you have to kind of keep positive even on a bad day. And you want to just, you know, if I'm having a bad day, I'll just grab a book and read.
Yeah, and just keep moving forward.
That's all you can do.
Yeah, exactly. So now we're going to move to the portion of questions and answers. So if anybody has a question for Mark or Sue or myself, feel free to type it in the chat box and we'll get to as many as we can. I'll just give everybody a minute to go.
Okay. I'm just going to kick out for a second. I got to change my background because I look like a Smurf. Be right back.
Alrighty.
Are you on Rituxan?
Oh, sorry. Are you asking Mark? He's just disappeared there.
Well, or yourself.
Sorry, am I on what?
Rituxan, that
Rituxan?
yeah.
No, I'm not.
No.
No, I take a different one. I'm on a biologic, but just a different one.
Okay.
Yeah. So, oh, here we go. Oh, perfect. We've got some questions popping up. Thank you very much to everybody that's typing them in there. I'm seeing them. We'll just wait for Mark to come back here. Hopefully he'll be back in a second. But well, Mark's coming back. Maybe I'll ask you, Sue. Rosalind has asked, just want to know what medications are they both on now? So,
well, I'm just weaning off of prednisone, and I have it's not gabapentin. It starts with an A for my tingling in my feet and that. That's basically it. And then I started the Rituxan. I've had 2 treatments, Rituxan.
Okay. And Mark, the question from Rosalind is just want to know what medications that you guys are on now?
I'm on Rituxan myself for it. Plus a few other fascinating things.
Okay. And the second question I have from Sam is, have you ever shared your story through blogs or other communities? That's a great question.
Yes, I have. Like my Devix family, and because I'm on your board out in BC.
So Mark's referring to 2 Facebook groups, My Divix Family, which is one, and then the one that I moderate, which is NMOSD Canada. And Sue, have you ever shared your story through blogs or other communities?
Not in detail. I mean, I've answered questions on the Facebook there. You know, yes, that's happened to me, this or that, but I haven't really shared it anywhere else yet, except here.
Okay. I have done quite a bit of writing for the MS Society, which is available on their Someone Like Me blog. I've written for NMO Diaries, which another ambassador, Jenna, and I, and 2 other NMO patients wrote together. And I'm currently writing a twice monthly article for BioNews. And if you're interested in any of that, I can put links in the NMOSD Canada group after the webinar if you want to read sort of past posts that I've made about that, because I do talk quite a bit about it through my advocacy work. Okay, there's another question. Rosalind would like to know, Mark, what are you doing to not end up having flare-ups is what they're asking. And they wanted to know again what medication you're on, Marc.
On Rituxan or rituximab, that's the proper name for it.
Uh,
Rituxan's are sort of the short name for it. The Rituxan seems to be doing the trick. You know, my system's calm, you know, and even to the point where I've had, you know, I've had odds and ends, things like, what are we at here? Two years ago in May, I was at a family reunion, and the last day I was sick as a dog, and as it turned out, I had pneumonia, and then I got a secondary lung infection. So that was 6 weeks, but my system actually held. I didn't have a flare up, which really, you know, so that's why to a degree COVID doesn't quite frighten me as much as it might some, with the, you know, having something like NMO or MS, whatever. But I just, once I made it through that and I didn't have a flare up, then I was like, okay, this is good. Because the last flare up I had was 2017. And that was due to a bladder infection that got let go a little longer than it should have.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting how we measure, you know, we look to think for ourselves because our doctors measure how well our medications are working either by, you know, our blood work or in combination with MRI. And so it's always funny how we as patients measure ourselves, and we're like, hey, I got through this event without having a major flare up. And it's always exciting when our medication works for us, and it's almost like we're expecting the worst and we're pleasantly surprised when that doesn't happen. So
I think to be fair, I think if you look, like especially around COVID, you know, they haven't said, but I don't think I think they were genuinely concerned for people like ourselves.
yes.
But in the scheme of things, I think we've been largely unaffected by it to a
Okay.
degree.
We have a question from Anthony asking, are you taking any supplements or on a diet to help you with your NMO? Sue, do you want to maybe address that?
well, no, I'm not really on any supplements. I have vitamins like your calcium and your folic acid. I mean, stuff like that. That's just normal. But no, I'm just trying now to lose the weight that prednisone put on. And I'm just, it basically is your size of your meal. You know, so I'm trying that and we'll see if it works.
Okay, and
That's
Marc,
about it.
are you doing anything with supplements or diet to help you?
I do, like I take vitamin D, which is, you know, sort of more or less standard for us. And then I take the odd magnesium pill, especially if my legs start playing me up, especially when I'm tired. Not sure why it works so good, but I'd read about it from a few other people using it, and told others about it. It's like they're like, "Wow, it really does work to take with, you know, take
Are you
them."
talking about like leg cramps, that kind of thing?
I have, like, I've got
Can't hear you.
yeah, it just, like, I deal with more of the transverse myelitis side of this disease,
Okay.
and like my last flare up was a T8 to T10. So for whatever reason, it really likes it to go after my legs. So at night, my legs generally, when they get tired, I start getting twitchy. And
Okay.
I'd read a couple people saying that they had some luck with magnesium. And so I tried it, and it works. Not sure why, but it does.
Okay.
Trick with magnesium is only take one.
Okay. And Anthony would like to know, have you noticed that the weather affects you either cold, heat, or humidity, and how? She says she can tolerate the heat as opposed to others. And she also wonders if you have any sensitivity to water. So I'm thinking maybe she's talking about like having a hot or cold bath or shower.
Well, for me, my body has never liked the cold, and it still doesn't. So I'd rather have the sunlight, the heat. And as for water, even a little bit in a shower sometimes hurts. It doesn't really hurt, but it feels like it. And then you just get used to it and it goes away. So yeah, a little bit of pain here and there, and
A little bit.
you keep going.
I love it.
How about you, Mark?
If anything, I'm more sensitive to cold.
Oh, okay, I've heard that.
Yeah, and whereas heat, I like a good hot bath. I'm quite content, and actually, if anything, I find the heat tends to settle my legs down a lot. So I'm one of these people, I like to be warm. And then my feet, I've got cold feet. That's genetics. But
It's interesting because I find heat really affects me. I basically hibernate from about late May till the end of August, sometimes early September, depending how hot and humid it is here. I don't function well in the heat. I find that my limbs tend to stop working properly. So for example, if anything above about 22 degrees will make it difficult for me. Just even going up like 3 or 4 stairs, just lifting my legs to get up the stairs is really hard. The messages are not passing through my very damaged spinal cord very well at all. And I also find that like I have permanent neuropathy in my arms and my hands, so I don't really have feeling. And so it's interesting because when you live with that long term, you think that numb is numb, but then when you get overheated, it becomes even worse, and it starts to become painful. So for me, I prefer the cooler weather. I do better in the fall, winter, and spring. And I'm very fortunate to live on the West Coast, although I find the humidity hard. I'm originally from Winnipeg, and I mean 40-degree summers would absolutely kill me. So it's
I live in
probably good
Ottawa,
that
so
I
I
live
know
where
it.
the climate is more moderate, and tends towards coolish because of all the rain. So
Yeah.
another question from Sam. Do you have any particular doctor you see more frequently than others on your health team? Do you go pretty often at this point? So I guess she's asking how often you're seeing your team and who you see most often.
For me, I probably see my GP more often when I need to. I like to avoid doctors. And I only see my, like, the neurologist at Foothills. I only see her twice a year. And then I've got and then we've got, most of us generally tend to have a urologist in the mix there. So I go, I see him maybe a couple times a year, or he phones me.
Okay, and Sue?
Well, for me, because I'm still even new to the Drumheller area, I had to get a new doctor. And one good thing is that he actually has an aunt that has NMO. So to me, it puts me at ease. I see my neurologist is a new team. She has sent me for millions of tests, and I'm still. She will, get used to me. So I don't see her as often as my GP. But then with this COVID, you can't even see them. They're all phone calls right now, unless he's really concerned, and then you can go in and see him.
Yeah, that's sure. It's definitely shifted to telemedicine or Zoom medicine. I know some of my specialists have been doing Zoom. My neurologist is primarily doing phone appointments at this point. And I see or talk to her at least every 3 months. I find my situation is quite complicated because I have other issues health-wise. It's like autoimmune disease, collect the whole set. So I'm monitored pretty closely by my entire team. So almost every week I have some kind of medical thing on the go. So yeah. Are there any more questions for Sue or Mark? ask away. This is your chance. Just waiting to see what pops up here.
Mine were quiet.
So with your Rituxan, Sue, are you able to go right now and have it in an infusion center, or are they?
Yes, I do it in Calgary at the South Campus, I guess that's what they're called, the new hospital. But I've only had the 2. I'm waiting for 6 months to do my 3rd. And then it'll be every 6 months after that. That's what I hear.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's made me feel better or not.
Yeah, sometimes it takes a while before you start to see the effects.
Yeah,
Rob,
that's what I heard.
have you heard of Solaris?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it, but I don't know. I think that's for the one for if you test positive for the aquaporin 4, I think. It's a newer medication.
For aquaporin 4 positive, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not for everybody.
Well, I'm on it myself. I started on it in March, and so far so good. Touch wood. It's I'm doing well. So, you know, it is new. It's very new. I don't know that a lot of patients are on it yet in Canada. To my knowledge, I'm the only person in British Columbia that's on it for NMO. It is used for a few other diseases, one called atypical HUS and another one, myasthenia gravis. And I believe there might even be a third, but it's not coming to mind. So apologies for that. Yeah. Rosalind, did you have a specific question about Solaris, or were you just asking if they had tried it? Just wait a minute and see if there's a response.
Can you walk?
Me? Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
You know something to get if you're able to walk is get yourself a pair of hiking poles. I'll put a link up from Amazon, the ones I've got. Because like
Okay.
people who have Parkinson's get prescribed to use hiking poles.
Okay.
So Rosalind,
for balance and that sort of thing.
Like I need a walker badly or I'm not going anywhere.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So Rosalind said she was just asking. She doesn't have any further questions. So it sounds like maybe that's it for questions. I just wanted to thank you, Marc and Sue, for being so open and honest and sharing your stories with us. I know that, you know, it really helps to hear what other people have been through, because if you've been misdiagnosed, you might think, you know, how many people does this happen to? And I think that it's more common than people realize, that, you know, the journey to diagnosis can take an awfully long time for some of us. And some of us go through, you know, multiple misdiagnoses and a lot of medications that maybe, you know, have a negative effect on our health because they're not controlling NMO at all. And so I think it's really important to share these stories so that other people know that they're not alone. And, you know, sometimes healthcare providers hear these stories and hopefully it makes them a little more aware of, you know, some of the challenges that we face, where people are telling us we don't know anything about our bodies and they're not believing what we're saying to them about, you know, the symptoms that we're experiencing, or maybe they're downplaying those symptoms. So,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it can be very frustrating for us. And it's almost like when you need to advocate hardest for yourself is often when you're least able to do it, because you're so
Yeah.
So I just wanted to let you know that, you know,
Yeah.
we really appreciate you taking the time and
Yeah.
being so honest and open with us.
Yeah.
And again, the recording of this webinar and others are available on the Sumaira Foundation Facebook and also on the YouTube channels. And this one should be up before too long, so just keep your eyes peeled for it. And I will definitely post a link to NMOSD Canada Facebook group when it's available. So, and if you're not a member of that group or the Sumaira Foundation group, I invite you to join that as well. It's a great way to stay abreast of what's happening with NMO and research and just developments and education that's available through these webinars. So thank you so much. And I thank everybody that tuned in today, and, you know, so appreciative. And Sue and Mark, they're saying incredible webinar, so insightful, and thank you so much for your bravery, courage, and sharing your personal stories. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. So we appreciate you being here, and we wish you all continued good health within your diagnosis.
Thank you.
Buddy.
Yeah, thanks. Is that? I think we're all done, Sue.
I think we are. I'm trying to get out.
Lower right hand corner is the end button.
Okay, oh, is there an end button? No. Oh, wait. Oh, boy. Yeah, blah, blah, Zoom, no.
Oh,
Lower
right
left
there.
is- Oh, there
Says
we are.
leave.
Bye.
There you go.
Bye.
Oh. Oh, I'm back again.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just do that. And we'll do that. We'll get out of Zoom.